My name is Maya Lin. I'm 27 years old. For 15 years, my parents called me too scattered, while my brother Julian collected Wharton degrees and inheritance promises. They dismissed my synesthesia at dinner tables, left me out of family business talks, and paid me a fraction of what they paid him. But on Julian's promotion day at the Sun River Resort, in front of 200 industry buyers, a retired attorney handed me a manila envelope that would expose every excuse my parents ever used to write me off. What they didn't know, great Aunt Ellie had been watching. She saw everything, and she left me a trust that would flip the entire Cascade Gear empire upside down. The Lynn Vance family was Pacific Northwest old money, the kind whose name was stitched into high-end tents, printed on museum sustainability plaques, and whispered about in Portland boardrooms. My father, David Lynn, ran Cascade Gear Co., the outdoor apparel company my great-aunt Ellie had built from a single garage sewing room in 1972. By 2023, the brand was pulling in over $120 million a year. I was born with synesthesia, diagnosed at 9. Numbers had textures. Supply chains had colors. To me, a spreadsheet wasn't just data, it was a living map. My parents' response wasn't curiosity, it was frustration. When I was 12, they hired tutors for Julian. Debate coaches at Portland Academy, private SAT prep with a Stanford alum who charged $350 an hour. When I asked for help navigating my sensory overload, my mother just sighed. Maya, we've already spent so much on specialists. At some point, we have to accept that some brains just aren't built for the boardroom. I was 12, I believed her, so I adapted. I started sketching color-coded flowcharts. I mapped material sourcing like ecosystems. And every Saturday morning, I'd take the Max light rail to Aunt Ellie's cedar-shingled house in Laurelhurst, where she'd sit with me for hours, teaching me to read business not in linear lines, but in interconnected systems. You see the whole tapestry, kiddo, she'd tell me, her calloused thumb tracing my knuckles. Most folks only see the thread they're holding. That's not a distraction, that's your edge. I didn't fully grasp it then, but I would. First, I had to survive another 12 years of being the family's quiet embarrassment. Christmas 2017. 20 relatives crowded around a reclaimed wood dining table in my parents' West Hills home. Floor-to-ceiling windows, catered Pacific Northwest seafood, the annual performance of Lynn Vance perfection. My dad stood at the head, glass of local Pinot raised. "I'd like to make an announcement," he said, that polished Portland CEO tone he wore like a Patagonia vest. "Julian's been accepted into the Wharton executive program. Full ride." Applause, cheers. Julian gave that practiced, humble nod. "My youngest," David continued, beaming, "is going to scale this brand globally. He's going to take Cascade Gear into the next decade." More applause. Uncle Mark clapped Julian's shoulder. Aunt Lisa dabbed her eyes. Then my dad's gaze drifted down the table to me. "And Maya," he paused. The warmth vanished. "Well, Maya's also here." A few relatives chuckled. Soft, awkward laughs. The kind people make when they don't know how to pivot. Julian didn't step in. He smiled along with them. I stared at my plate. The halibut blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. Under the table, a hand found mine. Rough skin, steady grip. Aunt Ellie, seated across from me, squeezed gently. When I looked up, her eyes held something fierce. Something that looked a lot like anger aimed right at her own nephew. She didn't say anything. Not then. But 3 months later, she called me to her house, said she needed to show me something important. I didn't know it at the time, but that Christmas dinner, that quiet dismissal in front of 20 witnesses, had set a clock ticking. A clock that would take 6 years to strike. After graduating from Oregon State in 2022, not a business school, never a business school, I applied for a role at Cascade Gear. I wanted to prove I could contribute, that the family company could be my path too. My dad agreed to hire me as a QA and inventory coordinator. Salary, $38,000 a year. That same month, Julian joined as VP of Brand Strategy. His salary, $210,000 plus equity. My job consisted of logging return shipments, checking seam integrity on prototypes, and restocking the sample room for executives who never bothered to learn my name. I wasn't invited to strategy meetings, never shown a single margin report, but I watched, I listened, and I discovered something about myself during those long hours in the warehouse. I could spot supply chain fractures before they broke. When managers argued over vendor timelines, I'd sketch out the material flow, flagging bottlenecks, predicting cost overruns. A trait I'd developed to manage my sensory wiring had become a tactical superpower. Aunt Ellie had seen it coming. During those Saturday mornings, she'd spread out old sourcing contracts and teach me to read them like blueprints. Your dad reads contracts like a salesman, she told me in 2019, right before her health started sliding. He looks for the quick win. You read them like an ecologist, you see how the whole system breathes. That same afternoon, she'd handed me a small cedar box with a brass latch. Keep this safe, she'd said. Don't open it yet. When the time's right, you'll know. I took it home, tucked it in my closet, and tried to ignore the weight of her words. March 2019, Aunt Ellie's sunroom. She was 80 then, her frame thinner, her silver hair catching the Oregon light, but her mind was razor sharp. Sit down, Maya. I sat across from her in the room where I'd spent so many Saturdays. The walls were lined with photos, Ellie cutting patterns in that 1972 garage. Ellie testifying before Congress on sustainable textiles in 1988. Ellie receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Apparel Coalition. Not a single photo of my dad in the driver's seat. I built Cascade from the ground up, she said, her voice carrying decades of quiet grit. One sewing machine, one warehouse manager, 50 years of grinding, your father. She paused, something bitter crossed her face. Your father inherited it. He doesn't understand what it means to protect something. He judges people by their pitch decks, their MBAs, their ability to charm a room. She leaned forward. I judge people by how they treat the people who keep the lights on. And you, Maya, you're the only one in this family who actually cares about what we're making, not just what it sells for. She pressed the cedar box into my hands. There's something inside that'll help you someday, but not yet. You're not ready, and neither is David. Her grip tightened. When he shows you exactly who he is, you'll know what to do. I wanted to ask what was inside, why she'd chosen me, but she shifted the subject, started talking about the salmon run, her garden, the book she was reading. 18 months later, she was gone. Complications from a stroke. I sat with her in hospice, the only family member there. The box stayed closed in my closet. April 2024. The email hit my inbox on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject, organizational restructuring. Confidential. Dear Miss Lynn, as part of our ongoing operational optimization, your current role will be eliminated effective July 1st. HR will follow up regarding severance. I read it 3 times. The words swam, settled, delivered the same message. They were cutting me. That evening I stayed late, filing return logs no one would ever audit. Through the drywall separating my cubicle from my dad's corner office, I heard voices. David and my mother. We can't have her here when Julian takes over, my dad was saying. It looks sloppy. The incoming VP's sister working in inventory? People will ask questions. What kind of questions? Why she's not in leadership, why we haven't moved her up, why she's the way she is. My mom's voice came soft. Almost gentle. We've done everything we could for her, David. Some kids just don't have the wiring for executive roles. Exactly, so she needs to go. We'll give her a solid severance. She can find something more aligned with her strengths. I pressed my palm against the wall. $38,000 a year. My studio in Southeast Portland, shared with a roommate, cost $1,400 a month. No savings, no safety net. If I lost this job, I'd be couch surfing by August. But the money wasn't what tightened my chest. It was the realization settling into my bones. If I let them do this, if I accepted their version of me, I'd spend the rest of my life as the family's quiet failure. Not because I'd actually failed, but because I'd never been given a real shot. Julian's promotion summit was the next day. I wondered what other speeches my dad had rehearsed. May 14th, 2024. Sunriver Resort, Cascade Lodge. 200 guests filled the timber-beamed ballroom. Venture capitalists, retail buyers, industry journalists, extended family I barely knew. Chandeliers made of forged iron cast warm light over raw hem tablecloths. A local indie folk trio played in the corner. This was David Lynn's stage, his kingdom. The place where he performed his role as patriarch, as CEO, as the man who had it all figured out. I stood near the entryway, adjusting the collar of my thrifted blazer. Everyone else was in Eileen Fisher, Filson, custom Patagonia fits. My mom intercepted me before I could grab a seat. Maya. Her eyes swept from my drugstore concealer to my scuffed boots. You couldn't find anything sharper? This is what I've got. She adjusted her silver bracelet. You'll be at table 14 near the service corridor. Try to keep a low profile. Got it. And Maya. She leaned in, her sandalwood perfume overwhelming. Tonight's Julian's moment. Whatever you're feeling, whatever resentment you think you're owed, keep it to yourself. Don't make this about you. She walked off before I could reply. Table 14 was tucked behind a structural pillar. My tablemates were distant cousins I'd met once at a funeral. From my seat, I could see the main stage. A massive backdrop of Julian's headshot in a Patagonia-style fleece. A banner reading Julian Lin, VP of Brand Strategy, Cascade Gear. And near the lodge doors, standing alone in a wool overcoat, a silver-haired man in a charcoal suit. He wasn't networking, wasn't eating, just watching. His eyes locked onto mine across the room. A cold prickle ran down my spine. At 7:30 p.m., the music faded. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage where my dad stood. Glass of local cider raised. Friends, partners, family, thank you for being here to celebrate a pivotal moment for Cascade Gear. The applause started before he finished. Julian's strategy over the past year has increased our wholesale margins by 22%. He's secured partnerships with 3 major European retailers. And as of this morning, the board has approved his appointment as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Camera flashes. Julian stepped on stage, wearing that practiced, humble smile. But tonight, my dad's voice swelled, I'm not just celebrating his title. I'm securing our legacy. Effective today, Julian will assume full operational control. He'll also be named primary beneficiary of the family trust, including our West Hills estate, valued at $4.2 million. And most importantly, he paused for effect, the founding equity stake in Cascade Gear. The room cheered. Julian hugged my dad. Not a single person glanced at table 14. The cousin beside me leaned over. Maya, right? So, what does that mean for you? I opened my mouth, closed it. What could I say? That I'd just been officially written out of my own family? That the termination email was only the beginning? That every quiet fear I'd ever had about being not enough had just been broadcast to everyone who mattered. The applause died down. And through the crowd, the silver-haired man by the doors started walking toward me. Slow, deliberate, like he'd been waiting for this exact second. He stopped at my table. Up close, he looked older than I'd guessed. Early 60s, sharp eyes. The posture of a man who'd spent his life in contract negotiations. Miss Lynn? That's me. I sat up straight. Can I help you? My name's Arthur Pendelton. He slid a cream business card across the table. Pendelton and Vance, attorneys at law. I was your great-aunt Alina's personal counsel. My aunt, the words hit like a physical weight. She passed 3 years ago. I'm aware. He didn't sit, didn't soften. She left something for you, with very specific instructions on when to hand it over. From inside his coat, he pulled a heavy cream envelope, sealed with a red wax stamp bearing a notary seal. What is this? Her trust, the real one? His voice dropped. The one your father doesn't know exists. I stared at the envelope. The notary stamp read Pendelton and Vance. September 2019. 5 months after that Saturday in her sunroom. 5 months after she'd handed me the cedar box. I don't understand. Your aunt gave me explicit instructions. I was to deliver this document the day your father publicly sidelined you. Arthur glanced toward the stage where my dad and Julian were still soaking in applause. I believe that just happened. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Mr. Pendelton, what's inside? For the first time, something like warmth flickered in his eyes. Alina told me to give this to you the day David shows you exactly who he is. By then, she said, you'll be ready. He straightened his lapel. I'll be available when you have questions. You have my card. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. I couldn't breathe in that ballroom. I pushed through the service doors, found an empty corridor near the kitchen. Overhead fluorescents buzzed. The sound of celebration muffled to a dull hum. My fingers shook as I broke the wax seal. Inside, 3 pages of dense legal text. A notarized signature. A date, September 12, 2019. I read slowly, carefully. The words swam, but I forced them into focus. I, Aunt Ellie Vance, being of sound mind, do hereby revoke all previous testamentary documents and declare this my last will and trust. My eyes caught on a paragraph near the middle. To my great-niece, Maya Lynn, I bequeath 51% of my voting shares in Cascade Gear Co., currently valued at approximately $62 million, along with all associated voting rights. I read it again and again. 51% controlling interest. The document continued. This bequest is made with full knowledge of my nephew David's treatment of Maya. She has been excluded, minimized, and denied opportunity, not due to lack of capacity, but due to lack of understanding. Maya is not scattered. She was overlooked. And I will not allow my nephew's prejudice to outlive me. A sob caught in my throat. Aunt Ellie had seen it all. She'd watched every dismissive comment, every ignored suggestion, every quiet dismissal. Condition: to activate this bequest, Maya must formally request an emergency board meeting within 72 hours of receiving this document. Failure to act within this window will render this trust null and void, and all assets shall transfer per the 2016 succession plan. 72 hours. The deadline would hit at 7:30 p.m. on May 17th. I leaned against the cold drywall, the document pressed to my chest. My great-aunt had handed me a lifeline. Now I had to decide if I was brave enough to grab it. Arthur was waiting by the coat check when I stepped out. "You read it, the 72-hour clause." My voice cracked. "Why put that in?" "Your aunt knew you, Miss Lynn." He handed me a second card, this one with a personal cell number written on the back. "She knew that if she gave you unlimited time, you'd talk yourself out of it. The deadline isn't a trap, it's permission. Permission to stop waiting for your family to finally see you, to take what's legally yours." He checked his watch. "Deadline is 7:30 p.m., May 17th. 3 days. If you want to move forward, you'll need to file a formal request for an emergency shareholder meeting. I can help you draft it." Through the ballroom doors, I could see my dad still on stage, posing for photos with Julian. My mom circulating, accepting congratulations like she'd engineered it herself. If I did this, if I invoked the trust, I'd burn every bridge I had left. My parents would never forgive me. Julian would call it betrayal. But if I stayed quiet, I'd accept their verdict. I'd become exactly what they'd always said I was. The distracted one, the one who didn't matter. "Miss Lynn," Arthur's voice cut through the spiral. "Your aunt believed in you. She spent the last 3 years of her life preparing for this moment. The question is, do you believe in yourself?" I looked at the trust in my hands, at the elegant signature of the woman who'd taught me to read supply chains like ecosystems. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. "We're requesting that meeting." Arthur allowed himself a small smile. "She said you would." That night, back in my cramped Portland apartment, I finally opened the cedar box. My roommate was asleep. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting amber stripes across my bed, where I sat cross-legged, the box in my lap. The brass latch clicked open. Inside, a handwritten letter on Ellie's stationery, a faded 1972 partnership agreement, and a sleek USB drive. I reached for the letter first. "Dearest Maya, if you're reading this, Arthur's done his job, and your father's done exactly what I feared he would. I'm sorry I couldn't shield you while I was alive, but I can shield you now. The enclosed document is the original Founders' Equity Agreement from 1972. Your father's never seen it. It establishes that the founding shares carry permanent voting rights that cannot be diluted without board approval. The USB contains something else, something your father hoped I'd forget. In 2019, David proposed a resolution to strip my voting stake from 51% to 15%. His stated reason? I was too old to adapt to fast fashion scaling. The real reason? He wanted control, and I was in his way. The board rejected his motion by 3 votes. I was one of them. I never forgot what he tried to do, and I never forgave him for using your quietness as justification. As if minimizing you somehow proved I was unfit. Use this wisely, Maya. Not for revenge, for stewardship. All my love, Aunt Ellie. I plugged the USB into my laptop. The file was labeled Board Meeting Minutes March 2019. PDF. My dad's attempt to strip his own aunt of power. Timestamped. Documented. May 15th, 8:45 m. I dialed the number on the old contact list Ellie had left me. "Margaret Mags Chen?" A voice answered on the second ring, raspy but sharp. "Maya Lynn, I've been wondering when you call. You know who I am? Kid, your aunt and I sourced recycled nylon together in the 90s. She talked about you constantly." A pause. "She also told me about the trust, right before she passed." I gripped my phone tighter. "Then you know what I'm about to do. I know what you're considering. There's a difference." Mags's tone shifted. Sharper, more businesslike. "You want to call an emergency shareholder meeting? That requires 3 board signatures. I'm one. You'll need 2 more. Can you help me find them?" "I can do better than that." I heard papers shuffling. David's management style isn't exactly beloved. At least 4 board members have voiced concerns privately. They just need someone to go first. Hope sparked in my chest. "Who?" "Richard Hayes, Alina Torres." She paused. "They've both been on the receiving end of David's push to slash sustainability budgets. I'll make some calls. Maya, I need you to understand something. This isn't going to be pretty. Your father will fight. Your brother will fight. They'll say things that'll sting. They've been saying things that sting my whole life. At least now I get to answer." Mags laughed, a warm, grounded sound. "Ellie always said you had steel under all that quiet. I'm starting to see what she meant." She cleared her throat. "I'll have the petition ready by tonight. Meeting request, May 17th, 9 o'clock M. Cascade Gear HQ, Pearl District. Thank you, Mags. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're sitting in that room. May 16th. David found out about the meeting at 3:30 p.m. I know this because Julian called me 40 minutes later, his voice tight with controlled frustration. What did you do? I was sitting at my desk, pretending to audit return logs. I don't know what you're talking about. Dad just got a notice from corporate counsel. Emergency shareholder meeting tomorrow. Requested by Mags Chen and 2 other directors. A pause, sharp as glass. Mags hasn't requested anything in a decade. What did you do? Maybe they have concerns about company direction. Don't play coy with me, Maya. Julian's composure cracked. If you're trying to make a scene, if you're trying to embarrass us, I'm just doing my job, Julian, same as always. He hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, David stormed past my cubicle on his way to his office. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge I existed, just slammed his door hard enough to rattle the glass partition. Through the wall, I heard him on the phone. Ridiculous. Mags is probably losing her edge. We'll address the noise and move on. No, I'm not worried. Maya, please. She can barely read a P&L statement. She's not a threat to anyone. I smiled. For the first time in 27 years, being underestimated felt like an advantage. That night I prepared. Printed 3 copies of the trust. Downloaded the 2019 board minutes onto my phone. Wrote a brief statement. Not an accusation, just facts. Arthur confirmed he'd attend as authenticating counsel. Mags texted at 10:30 p.m. Petition filed. See you tomorrow. Your aunt would be proud. I barely slept. But for once, it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was anticipation. May 17th, 2024. 8:45 am. Cascade Gear HQ. The elevator opened onto the 4th floor. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of Portland corporate space designed to look effortless but cost millions. I stepped out in a borrowed charcoal blazer. My roommates, carrying a leather portfolio I'd bought at a vintage store for $18. The security guard at the boardroom door held up a hand. Name, Maya Lin. He checked his tablet, frowned. You're not on the authorized list. I'm an employee and I have business with the board. Ma'am, this is a closed session. Is there a problem? Julian's voice behind me. I turned. He looked immaculate. Navy sweater, tailored chinos, the uniform of a man who belonged in rooms like this. Maya, what are you doing here? I have information to present to the shareholders. Information? Julian laughed. A sharp, performative sound. About what? You work in returns. The nature of my presentation is confidential. You don't even know what EBITDA stands for. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's not that complicated. Julian's smile flickered. Before he could respond, my dad appeared at the end of the hall, flanked by 2 senior VPs. What's going on? Maya wants in on the meeting, Julian said. I was just explaining that's not happening. David looked at me the way he always did, like I was a smudge on a window. Maya, go back to your desk. This doesn't concern you. Actually, a voice called from inside the boardroom. It does. Mags Chen appeared in the doorway. 71 years old. Silver hair pulled back. Standing with the quiet authority of a woman who'd built supply chains when David was still in college. I invited her. She is standing to address the shareholders. Mags smiled. Let her in. David's jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might block the door, but Mags Chen had been a founding board member for 30 years. Her authority in that room outweighed his. Fine. My dad's voice was ice. Let her speak. We'll see how fast she embarrasses herself. The boardroom was smaller than I'd expected. A reclaimed oak table, 8 leather chairs. Framed photos of early Cascade products on the walls, including one of Aunt Ellie standing beside a sewing machine. 8 shareholders took their seats. David at the head. Julian to his right. Not officially a board member yet, but positioned as heir apparent. I was directed to a chair at the far end. The kids' table of corporate governance. In the corner, Arthur sat with his briefcase. He caught my eye, nodded once. Robert Hayes, the board chair, a retired logistics executive who'd known Aunt Ellie for decades, called the meeting to order. This emergency session was requested by Margaret Chen, Richard Hayes, and Alina Torres. Margaret, you have the floor. Mags stood. Thank you, Robert. I'll keep this brief. She gestured toward me. The matter I wish to address concerns a document that's recently come to light. A document that changes the ownership structure of this company. I yield my time to Maya Lin. All eyes turned to me. Julian smirked. David leaned back with theatrical boredom. I stood. My hands were steadier than I expected. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you to the board for hearing me. I opened my portfolio. What I'm about to present may surprise some of you. I ask that you review the evidence before drawing conclusions. David sighed audibly. I ignored him. Before I could continue, my dad raised a hand. I'm sorry, Robert, but before we waste everyone's morning. David stood, buttoning his jacket. I need to provide context. Maya's my daughter, I love her. But she's not equipped to address this board on any operational matter. She works in QA, she has no financial training, no executive experience. Julian chimed in, tone dripping with false sympathy. Maya also has sensory processing differences. She struggles with conventional data formats. We've tried to support her, but he shrugged. Some gaps can't be closed with effort alone. A few shareholders shifted uncomfortably. What we're seeing here, David continued, is a well-meaning but overwhelmed young woman acting out, probably triggered by Julian's promotion. Sibling resentment is Mr. Lin. Robert's voice cut through like a gavel. You'll have your turn to respond, but Maya requested this time and she's entitled to use it. David sat. His expression promised fallout. Julian caught my eye and mouthed, "You're embarrassing yourself." I looked at them both, my father, my brother, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, something colder, clearer. They weren't trying to protect me. They weren't even trying to protect the company. They were trying to protect their version of the story. The version where I was nothing. Thank you, Robert. I pulled the document from my portfolio. I won't be discussing my processing style today. I'll be discussing this. I held up the trust. The room went quiet. This is the last will and trust of Alina Vance, founder of Cascade Gear. Notarized September 12, 2019. David's face drained. That's impossible. His voice came out strangled. My aunt's succession plan was executed in 2016. I have a copy. You have a copy of her previous plan. I kept my voice level. Clinical. Under Oregon trust law, a subsequently executed valid trust automatically supersedes prior documents. This trust, I slid it across the table, was executed 3 years after the one you possess. I handed it to Robert Hayes. Arthur, I gestured to my counsel, who rose from his corner. Would you confirm the authenticity? Arthur approached. I'm Arthur Pendelton, partner at Pendelton and Vance. I served as Alina's personal counsel from 2005 until her passing. I can confirm this trust was executed in my presence on September 12, 2019. It was witnessed by 2 independent notaries, and the original is held in escrow at U.S. Bank Private Trust. Robert studied the document. His eyebrows rose. This bequeaths 51% of Cascade Gear voting shares to, he looked up at me. To you, Miss Lin. Murmurs rippled around the table. That's a forgery, Julian said, but his voice had lost its confidence. It's not, Arthur's response was immediate. And I'd advise you against making accusations of fraud without evidence. Pendelton and Vance's reputation speaks for itself. David slammed his palm on the table. This is absurd. She was ill, she was being manipulated. Manipulated? I pulled out my phone. Perhaps you'd like to explain this. I pressed play on the 2019 board audio. My dad's voice filled the room. Alina's 7 to 9. She doesn't understand the fast cycle market. I'm moving to cap her voting stake at 15%. The board needs to modernize. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. That recording, David's face had gone mottled. That was a closed board discussion. Alina wasn't supposed to. She recorded it, as was her right as a majority shareholder. I kept my voice steady. Robert set down the trust. His expression had shifted from neutral to something harder. Miss Lin, would you read the relevant passage aloud? For the record. I nodded, took a breath. To my great-niece, Maya Lin, I bequeath 51% of my voting shares in Cascade Gear Co., along with all associated voting rights. I paused, letting the words settle. This bequest is made with full knowledge of my nephew David's treatment of Maya. She has been excluded, minimized, and denied opportunity, not due to lack of capacity, but due to lack of understanding. Maya is not scattered. She was overlooked, and I will not allow my nephew's prejudice to outlive me. I looked directly at my dad. David has confused credentials with competence, pitched decks with vision. He tried to strip me of my voting rights because he saw through him. He marginalized Maya because she reminded him of the kind of leader he refuses to become. David said nothing. His hands, I noticed, were trembling. The trust concludes, I continued. I built this company from a garage. I choose who carries it forward. I choose Maya. Robert removed his reading glasses. Arthur, you can confirm this document is legally binding. I can. The 2016 plan is superseded. As of this moment, Maya Lin is the majority voting shareholder of Cascade Gear Co. Mags smiled quietly. Richard and Alina exchanged glances. And for the first time in my life, I watched my father look at me with something other than dismissal. It was fear. This doesn't prove anything, Julian said, but his voice had turned brittle. Even if the trust is valid, which we'll contest, Maya has zero executive experience. She can't run a company. I'm not asking to run it. I address the full room now. I'm asking you to examine the facts. I pulled the 2019 board minutes from my portfolio. March 14, 2019. David Lynn proposed Resolution 2019-4 to cap Eleanor Vance's voting stake at 15%. I found the passage. Stated rationale, the founder is no longer aligned with modern retail velocity. That was taken out of context, David started. It's evidence. I cut him off. Evidence that my aunt wasn't losing her grip when she wrote this 2019 trust. She was protecting herself from her own nephew, and she was protecting me. Robert looked around the table. Does anyone have documentation contradicting what's been presented? Silence. David. My dad's jaw worked. No words came. Julian. My brother stared at the table. His polished composure had cracked completely. Richard Hayes spoke for the first time. Robert, I think we need to recess and have counsel review these documents. Agreed. Robert checked his watch. We'll reconvene in 20 minutes. Arthur, please remain available. The shareholders rose. Conversations broke out in hushed tones. David didn't move. He sat frozen, staring at the photo of Aunt Ellie on the wall. I wondered if he could feel her watching. 20 minutes stretched into 40. The board's legal counsel, a sharp attorney named Chen, spent the entire time on the phone with Pendelton and Vance, U.S. Bank Trust, and the Oregon Secretary of State's Records. I sat alone at the end of the table. Arthur brought me a glass of water. Mags patted my shoulder as she passed. David and Julian huddled in the corner, their whispered argument growing increasingly frantic. Finally, counsel returned and whispered in Robert's ear. Robert's expression flickered. Surprise, then resignation. Please take your seats. The shareholders filed back. The tension had crystallized into something brittle. Our counsel has confirmed the following, Robert read from his notes. The trust presented by Miss Lynn is valid under Oregon law. It supersedes all prior documents. Effective immediately, Maya Lynn holds 51% of Cascade Gear's voting shares. Someone inhaled sharply. Additionally, Robert continued, as majority voting shareholder, Miss Lynn has the right to propose motions to the board, including matters pertaining to executive leadership. He looked at me. Miss Lynn, do you have any motions you wish to bring forward? I stood. My heart was pounding, but my voice held steady. I have one motion. David rose from his seat. Robert, this is... Sit down, David. Robert's voice carried unexpected steel. Maya has the floor. David sat. His face had gone gray. I looked around the table at 8 people who, until an hour ago, had never considered me capable of anything. Now they waited for my decision. The power to dismantle my father's career was in my hands. I thought about what Aunt Ellie would want, and I made my choice. I'm not proposing to remove David Lynn as CEO. The tension in the room shifted. Julian's head snapped up. Even Mags looked surprised. What I am proposing, I continued, is a vote of confidence. The board will decide whether David Lynn retains their confidence as CEO of Cascade Gear. If the majority votes no confidence, he resigns. If the majority votes confidence, I will not interfere with operational leadership during my tenure as majority shareholder. This is absurd, Julian stood. You're turning this into a spectacle, a revenge fantasy. No, I met his eyes. This is corporate governance. The same process that exists in every well-run company. The same process Aunt Ellie established in our bylaws decades ago. I paused. If Dad has the board's confidence, he has nothing to worry about. Robert studied me for a long moment. Something like respect flickered in his expression. Is there a second for this motion? Seconded. Mags didn't hesitate. Then we'll vote. All those expressing confidence in David Lynn as CEO, raise your hands. 3 hands went up. David's allies. People who owed their board seats to his endorsements. All those expressing no confidence. 5 hands rose. Robert counted twice. Then he set down his pen. The motion carries 5-3 with 0 abstentions. He turned to David. Mr. Lynn, the board has voted no confidence. Per section 12.4 of our bylaws, you have 30 days to tender your resignation. David said nothing. He stood, looked at me, really looked at me. For what might have been the first time in my life, I expected rage. Defensiveness, threats. What I saw was worse. Recognition. The understanding that he'd underestimated me so completely that he'd lost everything. He walked out without a word. I know what some of you are thinking right now. Why didn't she just fire him? Why give him the chance to keep his job? Because revenge isn't justice. Because burning someone down doesn't undo what they did to you. And because my great-aunt didn't raise me to be cruel. She raised me to be fair. If that resonates with you, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications. Because the story isn't over, not even close. Now, back to what happened after that room cleared. David caught me in the hallway outside the boardroom. My mom was with him. Someone must have called her during the recess. Her face was tear-streaked, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. You! David's voice was barely controlled. You ungrateful, scheming David. My mom put a hand on his arm. Not here. She just dismantled our family in front of 8 people. I stood my ground. I didn't dismantle anything. I told the truth. The truth? David laughed bitterly. Your aunt was manipulated. That lawyer Pendelton, he must have. Aunt Ellie wrote that trust 5 months after you tried to strip her of power. Because she saw exactly who you are. My voice didn't waver. You didn't lose because I betrayed you. You lost because you betrayed her. My mom stepped forward. Maya, sweetheart, you have to understand, we were trying to protect you. You've always struggled. We didn't want to set you up to fail. You didn't protect me? 27 years of quiet crystallized into words. You erased me, every family dinner, every holiday. Every conversation where you talked about Julian's wins and pretended I didn't exist. That wasn't protection. That was abandonment. That's not fair. You're right, it wasn't. I met my mother's eyes. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of this family. I'm done proving. The documents speak for themselves. David grabbed my arm. This isn't over. We'll contest that trust. I pulled free. You'll lose, and you know it. Because Aunt Ellie planned for every contingency, including this one. I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard my mom's voice. Maya, wait. I didn't wait. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their permission to leave. The elevator doors closed on my parents' faces. I leaned against the brushed steel wall, finally allowing myself to breathe. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past 3 hours began to ebb, leaving something unexpected in its wake. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Grief. I just severed 27 years of hoping things would change. Of believing that if I was patient enough, quiet enough, adaptable enough, my parents would eventually see me. Love me the way they loved Julian. That hope was dead now. I'd let it go myself. The elevator descended 4 floors. By the time it reached the lobby, I'd wiped my eyes and straightened my borrowed blazer. Arthur was waiting by the security desk. That was, he searched for the word, remarkable. It was necessary. Your aunt would agree. He fell into step beside me as I walked toward the exit. What happens now? Now I go home. Sleep, try to figure out what my life looks like without the family I thought I had. And the company? I don't want to be CEO, I never did. We stopped at the revolving doors. I just want the company my great-aunt built to be run by people who actually care about what it stands for, not people who see it as their personal inheritance. Arthur nodded slowly. The board will want to meet with you. Discuss transition plans, your role going forward. I know, but not today. I pushed through the door, felt the Portland spring air hit my face. Today, I just need to be Maya Lynn, not a majority shareholder, not a casualty, not a symbol. And tomorrow? I looked back at the Cascade Gear HQ, 4 stories of glass and reclaimed timber bearing my family's name. Tomorrow, I start building something new. May 18th, 2024. David Lynn signed his resignation letter at 4:00 p.m. I wasn't there. I learned about it through an email from Robert Hayes. Miss Lynn, your father has tendered his resignation effective June 15th, 2024. The board has appointed me as interim CEO while we conduct a search for permanent leadership. Additionally, the board has voted to offer you a formal position, Director of Sustainable Innovation. This role would allow you to lead our new eco-materials division while you determine your long-term relationship with the company. Please let me know your thoughts. Regards, Robert Hayes. I read the email 3 times, habit, and forwarded it to Arthur for review. His response came within an hour, fair offer. No hidden strings. Congratulations, Maya. That evening, an all-company email went out to the Cascade Gear team. Effective June 15th, David Lynn will step down as CEO. Robert Hayes will serve as interim CEO. Additionally, the board welcomes Maya Lynn as Director of Sustainable Innovation in her capacity as majority voting shareholder. We thank David for his years of service and wish him well in future endeavors. My phone buzzed with messages. Colleagues I'd worked beside for 2 years, people who'd never learned my name suddenly wanted to grab coffee, to reconnect, to catch up. I ignored most of them. But one message stood out. From Patricia Ruiz, a senior logistics manager who'd started at the company in 1998, who'd worked directly with Aunt Ellie. Maya, Ellie used to talk about you constantly. She said you saw the whole ecosystem. I never understood what she meant until today. Welcome to the boardroom. She'd be so proud. I saved that message. Some validation doesn't come from family. Sometimes that's better. 1 week later, the story went public. Portland Business Journal, Cascade Gear shakeup. Founder's great-niece takes control after secret trust surfaces. The article didn't name me directly. Corporate privacy laws prevented that. But anyone in Pacific Northwest retail knew exactly who it was about. In a dramatic turn, the heir apparent to the Cascade Gear empire has been displaced by a previously uncredited family member. Sources close to the board describe the transition as long overdue, citing concerns about former leadership's push toward fast fashion scaling. David and my mom canceled their appearance at the Portland Design Week Gala. Health reasons, according to their publicist. 3 major retail partners requested meetings with me personally. Not with my dad, not with the board, with me. 2 of them, after an hour-long conversation each, confirmed they'd continue their partnership with Cascade Gear. We've had concerns about David's direction for years, one admitted. Your aunt built something real. It's good to see her vision protected. The social fallout rippled outward. Friends of my parents suddenly remembered prior commitments. Invitations to charity galas dried up. The Lynn Vance name, which had once opened every door in the Pearl District, now carried an asterisk. I didn't celebrate their humiliation, but I didn't mourn it either. Mags called me on a Saturday morning. How are you holding up? I don't know yet, ask me in 6 months. Fair enough. A pause. Ellie would have handled it exactly the same way. You know, the confidence vote instead of termination. Giving him a chance he didn't deserve. She laughed softly. She always said mercy was the ultimate power move. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Mercy wasn't weakness. Mercy was choice. And for the first time, the choice had been mine. June 2nd, 2024. 3 weeks after the meeting, my phone rang at 2:00 p.m. Maya. My mom's voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. Can we talk? Just us? I agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the Alberta Arts District. Neutral ground. No chance of David showing up with lawyers. My mom was already there when I arrived. She looked older somehow. The careful styling couldn't hide the exhaustion beneath. Thank you for coming. She wrapped her hands around a cup she hadn't touched. I know I don't deserve it. What do you want, Mom? To apologize. The word came out cracked. For everything, for the way we treated you. For the things we said, for the things we didn't say. Are you apologizing because you're sorry, or because the power dynamic changed? She flinched. The question hung between us like smoke. Both, she finally admitted. I'm ashamed to say it, but both? Her eyes welled. I was so focused on Julian's trajectory, on maintaining appearances. I told myself we were shielding you from expectations you couldn't meet. But that was a lie. I told myself that so I wouldn't have to feel guilty. You let Dad call me distracted in front of family, in front of partners. You never defended me, not once. I know. A tear slipped down her cheek. I know. And I can never undo it. But Maya, I don't want to lose you entirely. I don't know if that's even possible anymore, but I had to try. I looked at this woman who'd been my mother for 27 years, who'd braided my hair as a kid and forgotten my birthdays as an adult. I can't pretend the last 2 decades didn't happen, I said slowly, but I'm willing to try building something new, something honest. She nodded, unable to speak. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. August 2024, 2 months later, Julian called while I was walking through Forest Park. I almost didn't answer. Maya, I know I have no right to ask, but can we meet? There's something I need to say. We sat on a bench overlooking the Willamette River. The late summer heat pressed down like a weight. Julian looked different. The armor of perfection he'd worn his whole life had cracked, dark circles under his eyes. Hair pulled back carelessly. I've been in therapy, he said without preamble, since May, twice a week. That's good. It's brutal, he laughed humorlessly. Turns out being the golden child isn't actually a gift. It's a different kind of cage. I waited. Dad expected me to be flawless. Every grade, every pitch, every award was never enough. It was just the baseline for what came next. He stared at the water. And the way they treated you. I told myself it was just how things were, that you were different, that I was protecting you by not challenging them. You weren't protecting me. No, his voice cracked. I was protecting myself. Because if I defended you, I became a target too. He finally looked at me. That's not an excuse, it's just the truth. What do you want from me, Julian? Nothing, I don't deserve anything. His voice broke. I just wanted you to know, I see you now, really see you, and I'm sorry I didn't look sooner. We sat in silence, two siblings who'd grown up in the same house as strangers. I can't go back to how things were, I said finally. But I'm not interested in staying enemies either. Maybe we start over from scratch. Julian's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that. It wasn't the sibling relationship I'd wanted as a kid, but maybe it could become something real. November 2024, 6 months after the board meeting. I moved into my own apartment in the Mississippi district. One bedroom, exposed brick. A view of the city my great-aunt had walked through to her first garage in 1972. The rent was more than I'd ever paid, but I could afford it now. My new salary as Director of Sustainable Innovation at Cascade Gear, $175,000 a year, plus dividends from my shares. The title was my idea. A new division focused on circular textiles, regenerative sourcing, and low-impact manufacturing. The kind of innovation Aunt Ellie would have championed if she'd lived to see it. David called once a month now. Short conversations, polite. He asked about the weather, about my new apartment, about work. We both pretended the past hadn't happened. It was easier that way. My mom and I had lunch every other week. Slowly, awkwardly, she was learning to see me as a person instead of a problem. It wasn't the mother-daughter relationship I'd dreamed of, but it was honest, which was more than we'd ever had. Julian and I got coffee on weekends sometimes. We were learning each other, really learning, for the first time. He told me about the pressure he'd carried. I told him about the loneliness. Neither of us pretended the past was okay, but we were writing a new story. On the wall of my apartment, I'd hung Aunt Ellie's portrait, the same one that had watched over the boardroom for decades. Sometimes, when the evening light hit it just right, I could almost see her smiling. You did it, kiddo, I thought. You gave me the tools, I just had to be brave enough to use them. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now, I was finally, fully myself. Looking back, I understand something now that I couldn't have understood at 27. My great-aunt didn't leave me 51% of her company because I was better than Julian. She left it to me because she knew I wouldn't let power corrupt me the way it had corrupted my dad. Synesthesia isn't my flaw. It's part of how I'm wired, like my pattern recognition, my patience, my ability to see systems others miss. The things that made me scattered in my parents' eyes were the exact things that made me see the truth when everyone else looked away. David judged worth by credentials, by degrees, by performance. Aunt Ellie judged worth by character, by stewardship, by the way you treated the people who kept the gears turning. And now, finally, I get to judge my own worth. Not by what my parents say, not by what my brother achieved, not by what any algorithm thinks, by my own standard, my own measure, my own truth. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've ever been the overlooked one, the dismissed one, the one they said would never amount to anything, I want you to know something. You don't need a secret trust to prove your value. But you do need to give yourself permission to stop seeking approval from people who will never give it. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. They let you decide who gets access to your life and on what terms. My family sidelined me for 27 years, but I didn't need to burn them down to find peace. I just needed to stop waiting for them to see me and start seeing myself. That's the real inheritance my great-aunt left me, and nobody can ever take it away. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by the people who failed to see it, I want to hear from you. Subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment telling me your story, and thank you for listening. Until next time.